Now, so far, our animation is not long enough to show for the entire length of our background. Now, we could, of course, just copy our sprites in the score, like this, on the Shift key, and go to Copy Sprites, and then we could put it here and say Paste Sprites, and there it would be. And we would have duplicated it. But I'm not going to do that. We have it selected. I'm going to delete it. There's a different way we can do this. There's a better solution, and it's called the film loop. Okay? A film loop creates a separate cast member that contains an animation we've already created in our score. This is another kind of cast member. It's called a film loop cast member. And let me demonstrate how we can create a film loop with the example of our eyes. I can create a film loop of our shifty eyes by selecting the sprites that make up the animation in our score first. So I select one, I hold down the Shift key, and then I select the end. That's how you select a range. So I've selected the sprites that I want to be a part of my film loop, and now I go up to the Insert menu, and I select Film Loop. Okay. Now this brings up a dialog asking me what I want to name my film loop. Let's call it Eye Loop. It's a loop of our eyes going back and forth. And I click OK. Now look in the cast member. Look in the cast. This adds a new cast member. It's a different kind of cast member, one we haven't seen before, called the film loop. And it adds this cast member to our cast window. Now, we can delete the animation that we created before. So we already have it selected here, so we can just press delete. I'm going to delete all these in our score. And now, I'm going to drag this, I'm going to replace it with the film loop that I just created, and I can do that by dragging it into the next available sprite channel. And this makes the film loop that I created called Eye Loop appear in the center. Unfortunately, this registration point is a little different the way film loops work, so I'm going to have to reposition it. So I just move it to the center. And there we go. Now, it's only 5 frames long because that's the default sprite span that we set. So if we rewind and play it now, we can see what happens, which is nothing really. Just the eyes show up and then they disappear. Now, we're only seeing the first part of our animation because it's only 5 frames long. But we can extend this sprite so that it ends where our animation ended before, and then we'll see the whole animation. But before we do that, let's just extend it to where our animation was before. Remember when we created the eye loop animation, it basically stopped here. Okay, that was one full repetition of the animation. It was 5 frames long, another 5 frames, and another 5 frames. So if we rewind and play, we now see the animation up to that point. Now, what happens when we drag and extend this out to the end of our movie? If we extend it to the end, well, there's 2 things that you might think could happen. One is, well, maybe it's going to sort of spread out the animation. It'll still just go through one loop, but it'll take longer. That's one thing that it could do. That is not what it does. It does not do that. What it does is it repeats it. Right? It's a loop. So when it gets to the end of our animation at frame 15, it's going to start over. So film loops, when you extend them beyond the length of their original the original animation that was used to create them, they will repeat. So if we click rewind and do play, we will see the eyes go through their animation twice. We press play. It goes left, right, center, left, right, center. Okay. So film loops can save you a lot of time if you plan on reusing an animation several times throughout your movie. You don't have to bother dragging the individual cast members that make up the animation into the score and positioning them and all that kind of stuff. You just create one, animation once in your score. You make a film loop out of it, and then you can just reuse it throughout your score. In fact, you can have it loop over and over in your score, which is a useful technique. Now, one thing you want to watch out for is, even though we deleted the sprites that made up the animation in the score, we cannot delete the cast members, because this loop is still referring to these cast members. So do not delete the cast members that make up the film loop. And that's how you do film loops.